So we are live from downtown Mill Bay. Notes out. Your notes from last day. Not the lab, the notes. The notes should be out. Let's go. We have to do a little bit of work before we go back to the lab. Your notes look like that, somebody? Where are we at? Pardon? Oh, speaking of which, I just realized I now have to turn this off because we need.
Dude, I did search that up right in front of us.
Pardon?
No, nothing. I'm getting side-eyed by you, bro.
Well, look at this.
Oh no, you're gonna know my Okta code.
Oh, you just printed it out? Oh.
I also did the hands-on version as well.
Hands-on?
I used
Oh, who's Neo Koku? I don't know Nathan's brother wasn't there.
Okay.
Who's the one with like frizzy hair?
Okay. What was the last page we did? This page? We did competition within and between species. But we got up to here at the top? Okay. I'm going to use one with writing already on it so I can go a little bit faster. There's a certain amount we have to do before we have you continue on your labs. Sir?
I have the pack.
No. Everybody's already taken it. I have no more. Where's your packet?
This packet, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. But I know you have one. You've been here.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
But enough people have taken the extra packets when they've been here that we don't have any more left.
Okay.
Did you just find it?
No.
Get blank piece of paper, transfer it to the other one when you find it. Different types of selection pressure on a population that is reproducing and subject to evolution. We have competition within the species. The competition within the species, it should be after that one if you're looking for it. So the theory of natural selection, which is, did that one. That is after it. This is before it.
What?
Yeah, right there, right there. There's all this writing, but right there. Here, I'll make it a little easier. The forces that drive natural selection are selection pressure. Anything that affects the survival of an organism in a population is a type of selection pressure. You have selection pressure from other members of your own species. You have selection pressure from other species. They may predate you, as in they are trying to eat you, or you're trying, and then if you're trying to eat them, how fast they can run would be really irritating if you need your dinner. And how fast you can run may be a survival, maybe a matter of life and death. So competition within species, competition between species, and then the entire environment. There's seasonal variations. Our little bunny rabbits, when we showed our little demo, when it went from the winter and the little brown bunnies could then get picked out by the wolves to the summertime when their coat becomes brown, they can blend in a little bit more. can see why any animal that lives in the north would have a strong selection pressure to any member of its species that could change its coat color depending on the season. The competition is over not just survival, but just shelter, competition within the species for other mates, food. The seasonal variation can be just things like temperature. Do you have a thick enough coat? Are you able to adapt to the changes in temperature? It can very quickly get too hot and too cold.
What does it say in purple? Like competition within species?
Oh, within the species, there's competition like between prides of lions for food. So lions will compete with each other as groups for the same food source because they're following the same prey. Between species, we can also have competition between where they're eating the same food. So they're not directly predating on each other, but they want the same stuff. And I could use lions again because lions and the hyenas, as made famous in the documentary The Lion King, fight over the same food.
Mr. Newfall,
Mhm.
is the Lion King Newf approved?
Is the Lion King
Newf approved.
the original?
Newf approved.
Yeah, yeah. With the song at the beginning and the dancing, great. They made some sort of live action thing, which is not live action because it's still animated. That's weird.
So that's not Newf approved.
No, make a new movie. I want to see a new movie. I want to see an old movie. Weird.
I won't be watching that.
Have you seen it?
Man,
Oh. That's too bad. We could have watched it in class otherwise. Seasonal variation. Mosquitoes are a huge one. Insects predating on you are very difficult to deal with. Some of the evolution of a tail is not just for balance, but in many cases just to get rid of the stinging, biting insects. They can also be a source of food if you can take advantage of them quickly enough. If you're ever in a survival situation, I recommend a mosquito burger over a locust burger. The mosquitoes just become like mush, and it's actually kind of like a burger. Whereas like you can really taste like a locust, like
Yeah.
you know you're eating an insect.
I get that.
Yeah, it's not as good. Not as good. Yeah. I also didn't like the flavor of the locust nearly as much. I mean, not that I liked the flavor of the mosquitoes, but I was able to pretend a lot more. There's also organisms introduced from elsewhere. This is just the same as the competition between species. But we normally look at this differently. If everything's evolved into a niche and they're all competing, it's a very carefully balanced system. And then like the new person shows up, throws all of it out of whack because they don't have any natural predators. The predators there may not necessarily recognize them. They're eating food from everything else and having a great old time. And can cause a huge amount of havoc in the area. Australia is famous for this because they started out bringing in animals to fix an animal problem. The animal they brought in didn't work, so they brought in another animal to fix that animal. That animal didn't fix it and then became another problem, and so on and so forth. I think the only animal brought to Australia that's turned out to kind of work is camels. Everything from rabbits to frogs have turned out to be a terrible, terrible idea. The mammals in Australia are not placental mammals like everywhere else. They went on a different evolutionary path. They famously crawl out of, when they're born, crawl on their mum to get to where? What did they evolve to keep growing? Kangaroos have a pouch. So they don't actually allow the fetus to develop quite as long inside the mum. It's born a lot more quickly, and then it crawls into a pouch, and then mum takes care of it there. Whereas placental mammals, the rest of the world, just grow longer inside, and the pregnancy is longer. It turns out that gives a bit of an advantage when the little child is born, is much more quickly able to run away from mom and do stuff. Although the pregnancy is longer, but it just turns out that's a little better adaptation. And so the little tiny mice with little tiny pouches in Australia are being outcompeted and out-eaten by the mouse that have been imported from Europe.
Wait, the mice in Australia also have
There's little like kangaroo mice, and they have a little pouch.
No.
It's really cute, and they're all dying.
Little
There's an island off the coast of Australia that has some of the original species where there has been no invasion. There was some rats there. They managed to eradicate them all. It's the only place other than one other place in the world that has no rats. If you want to visit the island, you cannot bring anything natural with you. They don't want any seeds. They will inspect your luggage down. They'll unfold your socks and look at them with a microscope. And they will take tweezers, and they'll either refuse to let you bring it, or they'll pick out the one or two seeds that you accidentally picked up before you're allowed on the island. They're trying to keep the island as a preserve from all the natural vegetation and animals that are there. Here we have Scotch broom. That's that yellow flower that grows in the ditches with a really strong root that's really hard to upbring. And if you have any seasonal allergies, you can curse the Scotch broom. It is the #1 contributor in our local area. It is not indigenous to this area. It was brought over from Scotland for one wedding. They brought over some cuttings, put it in their wedding. It had some seeds on it. A few seeds dropped on the ground. We have Scotch broom everywhere. It outcompetes the local grasses in the ditches. It turns out it loves ditches, and we build a lot of roads, and so there's a lot of Scotch broom. And the Scotch broom likes to grow right in where some of our indigenous trees. Famously, there's a type of oak tree, Gary oak, that is indigenous to this area, and it outcompetes that. And so we're trying to get rid of Scotch broom, but it's a little difficult. The green crab, the starling. I hate starlings. European couple brought them over because they were pretty and they were in cages and they could hear their sounds in the morning. And then one day, her husband died and she was sad, so she let the birds go. And now we have flocks of them flying in. All our predator birds look at starlings and go, ew, and they don't touch them. And so they get into huge flocks and then they fly into barns and they poop over everything. I had to clean up the poop. I hate them. I hate them so much. They destroy quite a lot of the crops in this area. They're not nearly as bad in their normal habitat because the predators recognize them really well. We already went through this. Did we do then? You said we didn't do that. Did we do this?
No.
Did we skip ahead in some way? Okay. Adaptation. Every organism has a method to survive. It's called its niche. Not, as I once said, it's Nike. I was made fun of in Physics 11 because I said infrared in a presentation in honors physics. Even the teacher made fun of me. I also used to say Beethoven. I read a lot. I didn't talk a lot. It's niche. Natural selection. Beethoven. Beethoven?
But how's it meant to be?
Beethoven.
You didn't know that?
You didn't? Yeah, see, everybody knows. Did you know that lieutenant and lieutenant are spelled the same? English
Doesn't
is
Canada
F.
use left?
Lieutenant has no F in it.
What does that mean?
Sick.
Lieutenant.
What does that mean?
It's a lieutenant
But Canadian?
in England
Oh, I thought it was Canadian.
because they got the word from the French and the spelling didn't change. English is insane. We have tons of words like that. I only learned that those were the same words, I think, last year. Miss Legasic made fun of me. But I always thought, like, I knew what a lieutenant was, I knew how to spell it. I'd always heard lieutenant, and I just assumed I hadn't seen the spelling yet in a book. And it turns out, no, they're the same word. They're just the same word. And infrared is, of course, if you didn't recognize it, infrared.
Wait, what's fitting
Pardon?
on natural selection?
Oh, it results in organisms fitting successfully.
Oh, that's it.
And I also want, a lot of our language really reflects a human desire to put consciousness in everything. Like, we talk about atoms being happy with a full shell. We talk about, and that's just a low energy state. Obviously, they're not happy. But the same is true of evolution. They don't actually have a job. if that job goes away because the environment changes, it's not like they deserve one. It's not like they don't deserve one. It's just gone. It sucks for them. Maybe not for the invading species that took it away from them. But when you look at a system in which every creature in it has evolved, it often looks like a really complex working system. Because you didn't see all the mistakes it took to get there. And you don't see all the mistakes that are going to happen in the future when, you know, sea levels rise or fall, the weather changes, it gets a lot warmer. Our tundra is still reeling from the effects from the lack of the woolly mammoths. The woolly mammoths were an integral part of the ecosystem of the tundra. They were big, and they broke the ground a lot and allowed a little bit more decomposition, and there was more plant life. And there was woolly mammoths when the pyramids were being built. Like they were around a long time, and then they died out. We used to think they died out due to climate change, but it was pretty cold for a long time. Now we think we ate them all. Like we literally just went north and said, good food, and like ate them. All of them. And now there are no woolly mammoths. We ate them so much, we even devised ways when they got rare to hoard them for a long period of time. First, we would just kill them all, and then just eat them until we got full, and then we'd just move on and the meat rotted. Because a woolly mammoth is big. Now they found evidence that some of the early hunter packs of humans would find a really big pond, kill the mammoth, prepare it in a certain way, and just roll it into the pond where it would sink to the bottom, and then they'd go back 6 months later, pull it out of the pond, keep eating. And they learned it basically a fridge. And so we just kept eating the woolly mammoths until we didn't have them anymore. There is a group that wants to bring them back because we have their DNA. They're still dead, frozen in the north in Siberia. So you can find like DNA because there's still tissue left. And it's been frozen for a long time, but still there. And they are basically elephants. So if we took CRISPR and a few clever techniques and like took, I don't know, an Indian elephant, gave it some woolly mammoth chromosomes or genes, and then just had a baby, and then that one has a bit more of a woolly mammoth, and then we did that again and just kept giving it a bit more and did it a bit slowly so we could make sure that we didn't like shock the poor Indian elephants trying to give birth to this if it grew too big or something, and just eventually get to a woolly mammoth, just in time for the north to be too warm because of climate change. We're on top of everything.
They did like woolly mouses.
Did they?
Yeah.
Did they just change a gene so they got a huge coat, or did they?
I have no idea, but I saw like an article that says that like scientists made woolly.
The woolly mouse. I think I vaguely remember what you're talking about. I'm going to go back and look that up. The types of changes you can get. One that's hardest to see is a chemical change inside of cells, where there's an adaptation, but it's not structural, so you don't see it in fossils. You might be able to detect it in an evolutionary pattern. Are you okay? Oh, okay. I just thought you were bowing to gear. There's a structural anatomical change. Their fingers get slightly longer. Their arms get slightly longer. There's more skin in between the arm and the body, evolving, say, flight, or just a behavioral change. Nothing about the organism changes. It just starts doing different stuff. Migration, hibernation. What would be an example of a structural change? Excluding all the ones I listed.
The woolly mouse thing.
Well, I think that was a CRISPR thing. They put in a gene. So a structural change that like you might see in the environment.
Walking on 2 legs.
I think you successfully gave us because that's just a behavior. Apes can walk on 2 legs, so can chimpanzees, so can bears, and frequently do. They just don't do it a huge amount of time. A behavioral change just might do it all the time.
Growing a tail or losing a tail.
Losing a tail. How do you know that we're apes and not monkeys as a class? Not because we have a tailbone,
We don't have a tail.
because we don't have a tail. I was in Toys R Us in Victoria before it closed, and there's a big display, and it said monkeys, and I was actually apparently quite loud because I'm like, those aren't monkeys. What are they doing? They've labeled it incorrectly, because what they had on the wall was a bunch of orangutans. Stuffed like not actual, but like stuffies that were orangutans without tails. Obviously they're not monkeys, because they don't have tails. They're orangutans. Why would anybody tell some poor child a lie? They're lying. And then Ms. Hanley made me walk away and said, it doesn't matter. They're just children. Leave them alone. Saying in a health food store, they labeled salt. They labeled salt. It's a bag of salt. They said it was organic. Salt is a rock. Like literally it's a rock. It can't be organic. I was offended. A chemical change.
Being able to
Ooh, photosynthesize.
Also like mutation and genes.
Technically, even a silent mutation is a chemical change, so yes. It is interesting to think about all the changes we don't notice. We know that humans, Homo sapiens, we are considered Homo sapiens sapiens, a subspecies of our own species. All the other ones are dead. We might have outsexed them, as in they survived, but every time we met them, they just became part of our family. There is times in which it really seems, according to what we were inventing in our stonework and everything, that we might have not thought like we do, but anatomically they were identical to us. And so someone came up with a theory of the bicameral mind, which nowadays is kind of looked at as like, that's a pretty weird theory, and there's not necessarily evidence for it, but there never would be. You know how some of you, not all of you, some of you have a voice in your head narrating everything? How many of you have a voice in your head that's telling you everything in the language of your choice? And it just says stuff on a regular basis. How many of you have just learned that other people have a voice in their heads that's narrating everything? Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but you're the weird one. Look at the hands around the room. Yeah. Some people don't have a voice at all. They just have thoughts. And then they have to interpret them. That's weird. That's not weird. You're normal. Trust me.
Is there like a test with
Pardon? What's the specific? Does your thought speak to you in a language? Or do you have a thought that is an idea, but it isn't expressed in a language?
what if it's like sometimes both?
Yeah.
Do you always hear the voice? Not everybody does.
Yeah, only
Only some people do, and you just learned that some people are not like us. Are they even
They don't like
human?
it.
It starts to get a little weird. Yeah. There's, you know how some people, have you ever tried to meditate? No? Have you? Do you have a constant voice, like regularly narrating?
but also pictures and stuff.
Yeah, you can get rid of it. There are some people that if they stop thinking their thoughts, because they're non-language, they just don't think. Meditating is like easy. And there are some people that thoughts are running through their head all the time. You can't stop thinking all thoughts. No, another thought. But when you don't think thoughts, you just think thoughts about not thinking thoughts. And then you're stuck with those thoughts.
So what do you mean by narrating?
Like someone's talking to you in a voice that you can hear in your head in a language.
What do you mean you can hear it?
You can hear it in your head. Do you not hear a voice in your head?
No.
Aha! You're the weird one. Yeah. Okay. This is a complete aside. You just learned something new about your question?
Is it chemical change like drinking milk? Like being able to
Ooh, behavioral change. So two. Chemical change. Lactose, I like that. Lactose tolerance. Behavioral change, drinking milk. And I really like this one because this gave rise to when we estimate that happened. because people didn't drink milk in large amounts until there was enough lactose tolerance. Anyway, the whole point of that voice in your head thing, there is a theory that at one point humans had their own thoughts and they had the voice in their head and they thought they were different. You didn't have a unified consciousness. You had a separated consciousness. And the separated consciousness, you had a voice that told you what to do, and you had a voice that was kind of you, but they were different things. You had a bicameral mind, it was split. You can get people that have an effect like that because your corpus callosum connects you to the two hemispheres of your brain, and some people, because they get seizures in one half of the brain, if it spreads to the other half, it makes the seizure worse. So what they do is they take the corpus callosum and they cut it in half. Not completely in half, but almost in half. And then, with the little bit that's left, your brain learns to communicate anyway. And then it turns out you're fine, but it takes a little while for your brain to learn how to do that. So for a little while, you have two brains that aren't talking to each other in the same head. And if you take a person who has that, and you put, say, you tell them to cover their eye, and you show them a picture of a horse, and then you uncover the eye, and you say, what picture did I show you? And they say, I don't know, I couldn't see. Because the eye that was open was not attached to the speech center of the brain. It's on the wrong half. The half that saw the eye can't talk, doesn't have a speech center, wrong half of the brain. So if you give them a piece of paper and say, draw what you saw, the hand that's connected to the side of the brain that saw it but can't talk will draw a horse. And then you'll say, why did you draw a horse? And they'll go, I don't know, I just like horses. Because your brain will make something up so that you think you know what you're doing even when you don't. If they hook you up to electrodes that measure muscle twitch in your arm, and they'll put a pen in front of you, and they'll say, I want you to pick up that pen, but I want you to tell me when you decide to pick up the pen, and then pick it up. That's it. That's the whole experiment. And they can tell, based on the muscle twitch fibers, they start activating when you're going to pick it up. And they can predict when it reaches a certain level, you have activated. It's going to pick it up, and they know exactly when you're going to do it because your arm is getting ready, and it's going to do it. There's nobody who decides not to after that point. They predict the people are going to pick up the pen before they decide to. So maybe you do things, and the only purposes of your consciousness is just to make you comfortable with the fact you did it by pretending that you decided to, but you're just doing stuff all the time, and your brain is making up a story to go along with it, is one theory of consciousness. So, in light of those things, the idea of the bicameral mind is not all that out of there, and that would be a complete chemical change inside your brain. It's almost the same brain. Something chemical, not structural, but chemical inside the neurons themselves change to give you a different type of consciousness. And we can't see any of that. I have a biochem degree. Ms. Hanley has a double major. One of her majors is in psychology. And when so I couldn't take any more biochemistry, I would go sit on the psychology classes. And they were always really cool. They talked about lots of interesting stuff. Single species arrives in a new environment. This would be like the Galapagos finches that Darwin famously found. It turns out all the birds he was finding on the island, he would find birds that were picking up seeds in water. He would find birds that were picking up small little seeds. He would find birds that were picking up big seeds. He found birds that could fly in the air for a long time. He found birds that just liked to stay low to the ground. He found birds that only ate fruit. Each was a different type of bird. One looked like a robin. One looked like a lark. They were all finches, every single one of them. And it turns out a couple of finches, breeding pair, just made it to the island and then filled all the niches. So every niche fit the bird to the spot close enough that they looked like completely different species of birds. That's known as adaptive radiation. If you pop out into an area and there's a new mammal there, it's weird all of a sudden the environment will actually shape the creature. We find things that look like other things in different parts of the world, even though one was descended from a fox and the other was descended from a wolf. But the new one, different types of hyenas, almost look the same because they have the same kind of diet. I don't want to go too long. Let me give you time for the last little thing. A few more minutes. Good? Still ready? Mm-hmm.
So you went in university when starting classes or here?
Sorry?
In university when starting to
Oh, when I was in university, yeah.
Are you allowed just to go into classes?
The class is big enough, nobody knows. Mrs. Hanley only came to my... I went to Mrs. Hanley's psychology classes a lot of times. She only came to my biochemistry class once. In her defense, though, I was the kind of student, I sat right up at the front. So I'm like, why don't you come to my class? And she's like, sure. And then I walk right to the front where and I sit like right beside the professor, and she's there going, oh my God. And the professor's looking at her like, why are you here? I've never seen you before. And she's to sit there while I take notes. Turns out that was a really bad idea. I did sit in her classes. Her classes, by third year, classes get pretty small because first and second year, about 50% of people fail out or drop out. So when you're in first year, take a look to your right and to your left, because if every other person fails, that means if you were planning to be there second year, then the people on either side of you are going to be gone.
Wait, 50% of people fail?
The difference between first year and second year is 50% loss.
Oh.
Yeah. University's tough. That's why what? Like you are sitting in what?
Classroom.
The classroom in a school. What kind of school?
High school.
What kind of high school?
University.
Yeah, university prep school is a dime a dozen. We're a boarding high school. If you're a day student, try to stay over a few times, then you'll get a similar experience if you can. And try to do it for 2 weeks if you can get the house parent to agree, because the number one reason people drop out has nothing to do with the academics in university. It has to do with the fact that they've left home for the first time. And you know how everybody goes a little crazy at the beginning of the year when they've left home for the first time, they're all new students and they don't get along with their roommates and people are stealing stuff and stuff goes missing and everybody's fighting and it's like, why is half the people playing pranks and half the people are really upset, and then, yeah, half the people in university drop out. They don't have house parents there that are saying, oh, poor dear, we'll try and fix things. You just drop out and you go back home. And maybe you try again, or maybe you don't. But 50% of people drop out, and it's very rarely to do with the academics. It might be that you failed out, but failing out is usually a reflection of the fact that you're living away from home and you're doing laundry for yourself for the first time. And you ask dumb questions in class, like why is there more mold on a plate that had white sauce on it than mold on a plate that had red sauce? Is it because the red tomato sauce is acidic, and your biochem professor says, you let mold grow in your plates because you're in university and you don't have people taking care of you, you let mold grow in your plates, or you fight with your roommate and you don't know how to talk to them. But everybody who's been to boarding school knows how to survive that. Privet student in the first year, their dorm monitor, who's usually just a third or fourth year student who's living in the dorms, they get paid a little bit and free room and board to make sure everything's going well and that people aren't like doing drugs and heroin in their room and like people actually get quiet. That person got kicked out in the first week of school. And the Privet boy, who had just graduated from Brentwood, was a first year student, put up prep times, as in quiet times. You're not allowed to be loud during the week because we all want to do homework. Sorted out 3 different roommate disagreements, and had started a cleaning rotation for jobs in their kitchen because it was a mess all the time. And everybody voted, we want him to run our dorm. He should be, and he couldn't because he's a first year and they don't do that. But it was like, what are you all doing? Obviously we need a job list and we need this and we need to do that, and he started running things. And he wasn't even like that good of a prefect when he was here. He just knew how it should run. If you've survived away from home, then university is much easier. Number one, don't assume that everybody is competent and you're not. Everybody feels the same or worse than you. Just put up if you're like, I don't know how to pass this class, just put up a notice that says, study group for this class, and all the smart people show up because they're the ones who are most freaked out. And then just use them to pass. It works so well. Yeah. Don't trust everybody, but most people you can. I'm a little leery of the UK schools. They still grade on a curve, which means there's only a certain amount of names and a certain amount of Fs. Universities will do that for large classes. A student came back, I said, how are you doing in first year chem? He says, I'm doing great, I've got 43%. Well, it didn't sound great. He goes, I got an A because I'm like the 7th highest mark in the class. So it's just great. But I did have someone at university who was studying to be a doctor, because in the UK you can do that a little bit quicker. They missed a day of class. They asked a person they sit to regularly. They're not friends, but they're friendly. And they said, hey, can I borrow your notes because I missed this day? And the person said, sure. I already have a photocopy because I was giving them to someone else here, and handed them a sheaf of notes. And they went back to study it. When they were studying, they realized something was wrong. And then when they investigated it and compared to someone else, the notes were wrong, as in they were written deliberately wrong, so that if you wrote a quiz or test on it, you would do worse, because the worse you do, the better that person would have done. They had prepared bad notes to give to people. That's a level of evil I didn't know existed. But it does. That's not everybody. Most people are extremely helpful and scared. Okay. Almost every species that has ever lived has gone extinct. Natural selection and adaptation are slow and continuous. There's constant change over time. We get things like Ice Age. Right now we're in the largest mass extinction since the last one. I think the last one was... No, I'm trying to think if it was Ice Age or Meteor, but one of the two. Like, huge calamitous event, species died. Now we have humans. If you've noticed, the insect populations are lower. You probably haven't noticed, because you're new. Cars would drive, and you'd have all these insects on the grill. That doesn't happen as often. It's a little worrisome. Insects provide food for lots of species. We don't want all our species to collapse. So, any amounts of land that we can preserve to allow the environment to preserve will be good for us, because we need environment to survive. Mutations introduce new alleles, then you get new traits, and over time you get a new species. It'll take a lot to take out all the species. It wouldn't take necessarily a lot to take out us, but it would take a lot to take out the species. It is fairly remorseless. It works by extinction, getting rid of the things that aren't working and being outcompeted. There's a word missing there. The complete loss of a species is extinction. We used to think the dinosaurs were extinct until we found them.
The sharks.
Sharks are dinosaurs. Sharks are older than dinosaurs. Yeah. Sharks are like old. Yeah. Where are the dinosaurs? You can buy them in Thrifties. Chickens, the birds, all the birds are. Every bird is a dinosaur. Bats aren't birds, just to be clear. The dinosaurs we thought were extinct, and then we just didn't recognize them in their current form. Birds are dinosaurs. They are the last living class of animal that comes out of that class of animals. Birds actually have a more evolved heart than we do. It's more efficient, and it pumps better, and it is connected better. We used to think, and one of the confusions is that we thought dinosaurs were a form of reptile. And yeah, reptiles branched off and made dinosaurs, but they also branched off and made birds. And now we know that if we remade the movie Jurassic Park, everything would have to be covered in feathers, most likely, and they'd be running around. Have you ever watched a chicken eat insects? If you're ever on a farm, just watch how birds eat. They are, if you imagine yourself being small and running away, they are terrifying. Now imagine one size of a T-Rex with feathers and teeth. And that is not something I'd want hunting me. Last one, where are we at? 57. Artificial selection. Darwin knew humans modified plants and animals because we'd been doing farming for a long time. And when you get down to it, artificial selection is just us being natural selection. And so his great leap forward was not coming up with a brand new idea, as is often the case in science. It's never, ever really a brand new idea. It's an idea applied in a new place. And what he said was, maybe the environment is farming. Like, it's selecting what lives and dies, not on purpose, just by accident. Like, if it's cold, the things without fur die. And everybody went, no way. And then he said way and published a book, and he got famous. But he was intimately familiar with, because again, he came from a fairly rich family, and so he loved to breed pigeons the way they loved to breed pigeons in those days. Pigeons came from I think the wild rock dove, it's a type of dove, and people would breed it for its pretty colors. They'd breed it to fly long distances. They would breed it for racing. There was in the same way people breed dogs. They used to breed pigeons. And you would have your pigeon hutch, and you would select the pigeons you like, and you would breed them together. And so he knew you could modify organisms through breeding. And here's an example you have in your book of the different types of pigeons they bred. There were hundreds of different pigeons. They have a much faster reproductive cycle than, say, dogs do. So you can get a little further breeding pigeons in your lifetime than you could with breeding dogs. And so people are intimately familiar with that because everybody's been breeding these pigeons. They would identify traits that they wanted. Oh, this pigeon has a bit of red in it. I like that. Mrs. Sanderson will be so impressed. And then you'd breed the red pigeon together with its brothers and sisters until you had the trait you wanted. Now, yes, I know in genetics we said that if you breed too closely, you get an increased chance of recessive diseases combining, but why is that not a problem for a breeder?
You can breed more.
Yeah, you just get rid of them. You just kill the ones that are bad. This is why there's always a little bit of suspicion of a breeder, because it's like, do you kill puppies? And people can be fairly mean to baby dogs and things they don't like. I lived down a rural road just off the highway, and I don't know why people thought this was a good place, but I guess it just looked rural. So people would take their animals that obviously they got for Easter or Christmas that they didn't want anymore because the pet grew up and was a little too much, or they just didn't want it a few days after Christmas. And they would just either let it go in a rural area, hoping it would survive, in which case it usually was found and died in the environment, or it showed up on our farm and got kicked by a cow and died. Or they'd put it in a box in the middle of the highway to get run over. Sometimes I don't like people. So you take a look at your pigeons, you see a slight variation. What do these two have in common? A little taller and a little darker. And as a pigeon breeder, you're like, oh, I like that. A little taller, a little darker. And so I'm going to breed them together. And then they have children. You go, ooh, that one's a little taller and a little darker. And that one's a little, and you breed them and you get, whoa, and then you get tall, dark pigeons. And then you bring it to the pigeon show, and no one's ever seen tall, dark pigeons before. And so you win the pigeon show. So pigeon shows were like all the rage. And then we just stopped. Like literally, it was like the whole world went like, pigeons are so last year. And guess what they did with all the pigeons? No, they just let them go. And now cities are filled with pigeons that are now wild. They're not bred anymore. They're just surviving in the environment that are now adapted to cities, and they just poop everywhere. New York is famously full of pigeons because of all the people that used to raise pigeons, and then they just let them go. Similar problem happened in India. Does anybody know about the India experiment? Cobras are a huge problem in India. So the government very cleverly said, we'll pay you for every cobra you kill and bring us. And then people said, we can be more clever than you. And thus began the growth of the cobra farms.
Yeah.
And then the government said, ha ha, joke's on you. We're not going to pay you for the cobras anymore because we don't want cobra farms. And then they said, okay, and they let all the cobras go. India still has a higher level and an endemic cobra problem because cobras essentially took over the environment. In areas there were some predators that ate cobras, the cobras killed them all because there were so many. And they're only just starting to recover now. And this happened like in the 50s or 60s. Humans are dumb. Humans are really dumb. We're also, when we're talking about artificial selection, we breed things because we like how they look. We don't breed them for survivability. This is a pit bull. This is a pit bull, 50s when they had black and white photography and no color. Notice a very slight rounding this way on the snout. That was the mark of a pit bull. That was part of it. I would say short ears, but they docked them, so we won't talk about that. And it had a certain conformation, and they liked a certain straight slope, so they bred it to look like that. Pit bulls have problems with how they breathe because we bred their snout. How many of you have ever had a German Shepherd? Did it have hip problems? They all have hip problems because when they looked at the German Shepherd, first of all, they're a guard dog. They're supposed to look mean and fast. And one of the traits they picked out was we like it when they slope down at the end. So now they look like this. We bred their hips out of them. They don't have proper hips anymore because we're not breeding them to run. We're breeding them to look this way, which doesn't need proper hips. It needs weird hips. And so the German Shepherd went from healthy dog to unhealthy bred dog. Famously, the British Bulldog, which was a guard dog, little old ladies started getting it for a guard dog, but little old ladies can't handle an evil-tempered dog, so they bred it for temperament. So you pick the cutest one that likes people, and so they became less of a guard dog, and they also liked the cute little folds. Had a couple cute little folds. And then they bred the folds so big, some of them can't see. Like the folds literally get in the way of its eyes. Humans breed dogs to not survive, but to be pets. There's actually a movement to reverse that if we can, but we have to convince breeders to use science. I won't show you a picture of an eye prolapse, but if you see a pug, we've bred their eye socket away. The eye socket doesn't connect, so their eye can literally pop out. It's called a prolapse, and you have to figure out how to stick it back in and take it to the vet. And it happens all the time because they don't have proper eye sockets anymore. We bred it out of the dog. And so humans can rapidly change. This is not a big leap to understand how evolution can do it as well. That's an example of artificial selection. Okay, last one. I don't know if we'll have time for all of this, so I might say just the discussion. But here's your assignment. B block. What? There it is. Given that you only have half an hour left, I thought we were a little further ahead than we would. I will not say combine the data and make a new graph. Don't worry about that part. So ignore this. However, I will say look at the data. There is data that was collected in this class and by one group that you should never have used for your graph. It's bad data, and it's an error in the experiment, and if you find it, it is a perfect reason to talk about error in your discussion. What I'd like you to do is get your lab book, write out the title of the lab, name, title, date, fix your table of contents if you didn't have one, and I want you to write a discussion. Okay? You have your lab that you've done. If you've done it, you have lots of points in it that you can use. I've told you some things that you can do. All of the lab books are in that big. I'll come help.
Wait, which group that is the group that has the
Or actually,
Yeah, I think it's
so what do we got here? Aiden, Maury, Grayson, Julian Baker, Rachel, Nick,
that's what it's
Jessica, Julian, Graham, Matt, where are you going? Ariel.
Wait, the group that has the error is in this class.
But then you gotta.
This class doesn't have it. But you can look at all the class data, and another hint would be 2 of the 3 classes has this particular thing read. There's other errors you can talk about too. Jaden G, Charlie,
Is he gonna tell us what the error is?
looks like I got Alex, a bunch of Sihu, Ty, oh, there's somebody in there. Tyler, Fiona. You can go get the break. Sterling.
Just use, are we doing this,
Just use
the discussion in the lab stuff?
You can talk
Okay,
about it,
so
but I
why
want
do you
a
have-
discussion from everybody. Oh, here it is, I think. Nope, this is Jamie. Oh, it's because you did it where you were last. What does that say? Does it say?
Oh, wait, no, pilot.
What is, oh, I had you mark them differently. Miyabi, Zach.
How do you print this?
No, that was not. Did you already go through these? Oh, I did call your name. Hello, Vienna, Jaden. Darren. Cinder. Jaden. Jessica. Chloe. Around there? This is little girl Ewok.
Wait, everything is in pen, right?
Oh, there you go. Sure. Anybody else not have their lab book? So one of the feedbacks from last time, I know about half the class or more forgot the table of contents. You should put that in, have number of pages, etc. It's just a paragraph. Let's do it at the end of class. Slide your lab into the lab book before you hand it in.
Wait, Mr. Nicole, so we don't do for all 3 classes, we just use the table.
You can just use your table. For you, I'm going to omit making the new graph. And I can't remember what the breathing problems they have because their stuff is not as bad as the one as a pug where it's spread all the way back. A discussion. So name, title, date, page number, everything you normally put at the top of the lab. And a discussion. If we go, yes?
If I have like a blank page here, can I just skip it? And then go?
You should still page number it. Why do you want to skip it?
It doesn't look good.
You should still. That's weird. Stop that.
Can I just start from this page?
You can't label it. Like label the page you're skipping with like name, date, page number. It shouldn't imply that you. And just to go all the way back to our lab style guide, a discussion is the result of a reflective process that compares the analysis to the theory and the hypothesis. The discussion includes a description of experimental errors and their consequences and may suggest further investigation. Your connections in the discussion to what we just discussed in class would be very interesting.
So would I have the results or have that
Wait.
like paragraph or not? Can I like answer each of these for the
Oh, a discussion is in paragraph form.
So I have to connect all of these?
Nope,
in
those
one?
are ideas.
Oh.
But in my when I just brought up what is a discussion, a discussion always has theory, so that would be those, and it always discusses errors. Charlie just brought up a good thing. Do you have to have every point? No. But you should have 2 things. A connection to the theory, in some way, there's lots of points there, and you should have a discussion of error. I won't read out the thing from in here where it talks about error, but some lab writer got really angry and said, like, don't say human error. What does that even mean? But like, it might be an error just in the nature of the lab. It's an artificial procedure. Maybe there's ways to do it better. Maybe my way introduces a common error. What are the possible errors? So at least one, and some connection to the class work. Oh, on the data. if you go to, or, sorry, that's class coverage. If you go to the, Battle of the Beaks, and you go to the class data, it is, whoops, right here. Block E, Block C, Block B, and if you scroll on over, you have the class data of each class.
Do we need to combine them all into like?
No, I said nobody has to do that, because, I only gave you half an hour. I thought we were a couple more pages ahead than we were, so I spent more time talking. And then I spent time talking about useless things, like
But Toys R Us.
Toys R Us, and like, do you hear words in your head?
Toys R Us.
What so we're just writing the discussion.
Just writing the discussion, that's it. And congratulations on being here today. You will have to write a discussion, and you'll hand it in, and you're done. Everybody who's not here is gonna have a completely separate worksheet that they're gonna have to do in the test center after they get back.
Right?
So, but Mr. Newfeld, do I have to write about result and hypothesis, sources of error, and like everything that's in the document?
Nope,
Or just-
you need at least one thing about error, and at least one connection to the theory. So your results to some aspect of theory would be great. My prompt,
So do we just write like a little, like a paragraph?
a paragraph, it's a discussion. Obviously,
Just choose-
some paragraphs might be better than others,
Just choose one thing to talk about.
but the minimum, maybe I should put that here.
Do we just talk about one of the points?
Yeah,
Like, okay.
yeah. You may talk, and if you talked about one of them in depth, I may be just as impressed as if you talked about 3 different things.
Commissioner, do we have to copy all like the procedures into the book?
No,
We just
no,
insert
just
this.
discussion,
Okay.
just discussion.
Because we have to have this in like
Part one question.
And you're handing it in at the end of class.
Yeah.
I'm not sending you away to break with homework, that'd be insane.
That makes sense. Do I write part one questions and then write my answers to them?
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. That's this. It's all the way down here. This. Lab style guide. You mean this? It's at the very bottom. You want me to just copy and paste this onto the sheet? Here. There. I put it here. And I'll give it a new color. In addition, and for you, just to help emphasize, I will strike through that.
So, for like errors, do we like put the whole of the training that these guys choosing with like the four points? Is that considered an error or part of training?
It could be, I don't know if that would be an error, because would you get different results without those walls? If you could describe how that would give you results that wouldn't show what the lab purposes. So like a source of error, if I'm doing an acid-based lab, is that the air is actually slightly acidic. There's CO2 and salts and water, so that's a source of error, and there's just nothing you can do about it. A source of error in this lab might be something in which, like, you are counting the number of seeds each one has eaten. We're doing it with humans. So, is there instructions that we should have given to, like, increase it? So, I know when we figure that out. Hold it. I think I have a similar lab, but different lab. Let me find it. Where's my mark book? There it is. Copy it out.
Just remember what we have, right? Like the paper test.
For the class data, I think you can all like from part 1 and part 2 or just part 2. For the class data, right? Is it using all the numbers from?
No, it's just using table 2. It's using everybody's table 2 from your class.
I would write more about errors. What I wrote was,
Sources of error is often the trickiest one to think of. But just think of the ways the lab can go wrong, even if nobody tries to do it on purpose. So, I may have, this is an old lab when Science 10 was different and we talked about plants. And we had a pollen simulation. There's human dexterity problems. There's behavior problems amongst the students where they don't do the lab properly. They may not forget to pick up pollen from one follow to the other. They may accidentally drop it. If I don't set it up right and consistently, then different groups will get different numbers. And then that when we combine the data is not an accurate reflection because the groups are already different. There can just be, in this one, there was more measuring errors. You weren't counting so much as you were measuring. If students didn't actually count, students can follow patterns that pollinators might not. And so if they just like the red ones, that would introduce an error in this lab, a rather significant one as well. This one had not 30-second timing. So there's some sources of error where you can think like, if this happened, and it can be a thing you think of that could have happened, and it can be a thing that you observed. So it could be, maybe the trays aren't the best thing. You just have to relate it into how that might affect the data. And afterwards, I did notice one glaring source of error. If you look at the tables, there's one table that should not be included in the data.
Do we have to mention it on the
No. And, it would be an automatic extending maybe.
What?
Wouldn't the fourth bird, in your life, if it could pick up more than one food, wouldn't it pick up more than one food? Because
Yeah, I gave that instruction, but did everybody obey the instruction? We also do it with different tools every year. It's just whatever's lying around the planet. Last year, almost every food was different than what was on the sheet. This year, it was one.
You definitely want to get rid of those hot moments.
We use them over and over and over again.
You know, it'll be a cool experience to give it to someone to eat.
Having done enough microbiology labs, I would never want to eat them. If you go to a bowling alley and you swab the shoes are clean. But they spray those every day.
With the balls or not.
But the holes where you put your fingers there, the outside of the bowl gets blotched. The amount of fecal matter we found in there. The backs of, I think the worst place we found was in the theater in the backs of the chairs. No, the worst place was makeup kits.
Yeah.
Never share anybody's